Welcome back to Switched to Linux. So today we're going to take a little bit different approach. We're going to just talk some philosophy. This is not like the outdoor philosophy series that I usually do. I want to talk today about Linux as a philosophy. And the importance of this is I watch a variety of different things, things that agree with my viewpoint and things that radically disagree with my viewpoint, because I think that that's what makes us a better rounded person. I have no problem getting into a discussion or debate on any given topic, and I love to debate. You know, people who know me know that. But some of the things that kind of impressed upon me today is I occasionally will get into watching a few things here and there from Anonymous, and they do a series of biographies on a variety of famous people who have helped the cause of free and open information. And this comes to me especially during this week when, you know, the W3C has officially made DRM a standard, which DRM is completely against the concept of the internet as it is. The internet itself was supposed to be a freely open, freely available flow of information. And what DRM will do is it will lock information from the web against certain people. And if you want to say that, well, this country can't see this information, we lock it so that your media extensions can't decode it in that region, but they can in another region. And these are a lot of challenges. And one of the documentaries that I watched this week was on Aaron Schwartz, who I can honestly say I've heard the name before, but I didn't really know who he was or what he did or what's the significance. I just want to talk about that and tied to all this of Linux as a philosophy, because Aaron Schwartz, even at the very young age, I think he started getting involved in this stuff at like 13 or 14 years old, somewhere around there, when he actually went to, he went from Chicago, flew a plane at that young age to watch, of all things, Supreme Court rulings on the matter of openness. And I forget what the exact case was, but he ended up being a person that co-founded Reddit, did a lot of work with Wikipedia, wrote the RSS-1 standards for sharing information, and really did a whole lot of things talking about the impact of how big money will corrupt institutions, whether that be corporations or nonprofits even. And it's a danger. And I'm not against money, and I'm not against companies, and I'm not against making a profit. And I seek to make a profit as I live my life as well. You know, I don't want to live the tiny rabbles of nothingness, but at the same token, there is danger in collecting too many resources, as that statement goes. You know, with power comes corruption, and ultimate power comes ultimate corruption, some would say. And the reality of it is as a company gets more powerful, they not only can they amass more money, but they can also start to direct laws in their favor, and that is what you would call a corporatocracy. And Apple's a big one of these. As I watched Louis Rossmann describe some things. In fact, I watched a video that he did 2 years ago, September 15, where he's talking about this concept some more. So Apple makes these devices, and I still have an iPhone here. They make these devices that cost hundreds of dollars. I mean, the new iPhone 10 is a $1,000 phone. And if you accidentally drop that thing and it breaks down to the ground, they insist you take that to only one of their guys that they don't even have the ability to fix it. They just swap it out. You got to pay them their deposit or whatever the price happens to be, which is huge. And what Louis Rossmann is arguing for is to simply say, give us the ability and the resources and the documentation to properly fix things. Because there was a time in our society when you would buy a product like, and I'll use the example of a VCR because they notoriously broke. If you've never ever seen the inner workings of a VCR, you know, the tape will open up and then some prongs will come out, and it's not like a tape cassette recorder, or if you see a tape cassette recorder, you push play and the little head just comes right down on top of the thing and it goes across. No, in a VCR, literally the head pops open and two big bars come out and they roll out a good 10 inches of tape wrap it around a bunch of giant heads and mechanisms. And there's a lot of things that would go wrong in those devices. But when a VCR broke, or your TV broke, back at that time, you would take them to a repair place because the VCR would cost you $300 or $400, but to repair it was only $50 to $100. And so it was a good deal to repair your existing VCR rather than just throw it away and buy a new one. But that's exactly the model that Apple has done. Of course, they're saying, oh, well, the higher level of iPhone 10 is so expensive because of the shortage on these NAND chips. Well, who do you think causes the shortage? Because watch the video again from Louis Rossmann where he completely debunks their environmental friendliness document, because when this phone just had, like, if the fingerprint reading home button on this thing died, Apple's approach is simply take this phone, run it through a shredder, and give me a new phone for about 3/4 the cost of the phone. It's not very environmentally friendly when all you really have to do is take out your 2 proprietary screws from the bottom, lift this guy up, and literally this thing is just pop on, pop off. Costs a couple dollars. But no, they had to lock the home button into the device itself that will brick your phone if it ever updates, and it may not actually work again. That's not very environmentally friendly. But then they're doing everything that they can to fight against any of the viewpoints that are going to come down and say, you know, hey, we should have the right to repair our devices. And that's the reality. If I buy this device, I have paid my money. Why can I not do with this what I want? And if I want to take this to some third-party guy to fix it, I should be able to have that right. And then, of course, we get Windows, which has such a dominant market share of desktop computers. And what ends up happening then is people just don't even realize there's other options. People, if you ask your average person on the street, they'll be like, oh, it's why do you use Windows? Oh, because Mac sucks. Well, tertium quid much? So of course Latin for third option, third choice. Linux, of course, there's other things as well. I don't want to throw BSD under the bus either, but the reality is there are more options out there than just Windows and just Mac. And just because you have a PC doesn't mean you have to run Windows on it. But Microsoft has collected so much money and so much power to that point where it's getting to the point now where if I buy a newer PC, I may not even be able to install Linux on it for a while. And that's a challenge itself. And so I want to talk about Linux as a philosophy. Why is it I wanted to switch to Linux? It was to make a statement. It was to say, no, Microsoft, you may not have my data. You may not direct me in the direction that I want to go. And then I switched to Linux, and really I've been on this for probably only about 2 years. I really think I want to say it was around 2 years ago, around now, when I started seeing the documentation of Windows 10 and what Windows 10 was doing. That's really when I looked at this and said, I gotta go back and look at that Linux thing again. Because I had an Ubuntu install laying around. I hadn't plugged it in for a long time. But I decided I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna have another look at that Ubuntu. And then I started studying and learning Linux at that point in time. And it occurred to me, not only did it give me more choice, not only did it give me more freedom, not only did it give more privacy, but it also gave me back that pleasure in the computing experience that I had when I first found computers, because you could get on there, and I was a computer geek. Like, I'm not a classic computer geek like, Brian Lunduke, I'm sure, and who's about my exact age, in fact. I think we graduated high school the same year. But what happened is, some of those guys, they were involved in computers even as kids and whatever else. I wasn't. I was actually an anti-technology guy. So much so, when I took high school chemistry, I did all of the math up and down the margins of my paper, and I still got the highest grade in class. It was awesome. And I did everything without tech. But I started to look at the world as you grow up, and I think around that age, 10th, 11th grade, I really think you start opening up. I really think you start seeing the world. And I looked around the world and I said, well, I don't really care for all this technology. But if I want to be successful in the future, I probably need to learn computers. And so I saved up some money and I bought my first computer. And I was surprised with the amount of cool, fun things you could do. And I learned how to do registry hacks on Windows 95. And I actually, even before they released Windows 98, had their theme function where you could undo themes. You could go in and manually change all your settings. I'm like, well, I don't want to keep doing that all the time. And so I went through and found all the registry files that changed the wallpaper, what changes the mouse cursors, what changes the colors, what changes the sounds, all those. And I pulled all those registry files out, and I literally put them on my start menu under a folder called themes. And I could go in and click a button in there, and it would load all of that information into my themes, and it would automatically change my themes for me. Now, nowadays, you can't even change, you can change, I think, the highlighting color. You can't change your mouse cursors, I don't believe. You can do your desktop, of course. I think you can maybe change your sounds, but I don't really know anymore. Computers around Vista started to get not fun. It started to get so locked into their own design and their own whatever. And as I start thinking back to it, what I talk about as having an enjoyable computer experience is, look at this computer. This computer is a beautiful computer, how it's set up. I have transparencies. I have a very custom mouse cursors. I could do sounds on here as well. If I boot up Firefox, I have a theme in Firefox that matches the rest of the desktop. That's totally awesome. I have translucency on my panels, but I can still read everything. I mean, this is a beautiful system, and I had fun building it. But once I built it, it gives me something that if I'm willing to look at a computer every day, I want it to look good. And I want it to look how I want it to look. I don't want to be locked into the modern UI changes because Microsoft says this is what the site, this is what your computer should look like. I don't want to be locked into the data services and the data collection because that's what everybody does. It's for a better user experience. Well, what if my user experience is to not let you collect the data and, shocking, report a bug report? Because in my experience, they really haven't been working towards a better user experience. And the best example I've seen on this is I have gone into this phone and I have looked at various apps. Now, I've gotten rid of a lot of apps, but a lot of the apps, if I pull up most of my apps on this phone, it will complain to me because cellular data is turned off. Well, I know that. I painstakingly went through the system and I turned it on. But every third time I open up many of the apps on here, it will give me that annoying pop-up that says cellular data is turned off. I know that. I've intentionally turned it off because I do not need that silly app using cellular data. If I'm on a Wi-Fi network, great, let's use it. Now, if you looked at that one particular issue on Apple's forums last time I looked, there were somewhere around 10,000 people saying, fix this stupid problem. Because I've intentionally turned it off, I do not need a pop-up every other time I turn on the app to tell me that cellular data is turned off. I'm aware of that, Apple. Well, they don't fix things like that. They clearly don't monitor their forums, which is where all sorts of people go, and they keep on going ahead and doing stupid decisions. Microsoft, they don't collect your data to give you a better user experience. They collect your data so they can sell it off to a really high bidder to sell you stuff you probably don't need and coerce you into buying things when you don't need it. And so I think about this, and I think about Linux as a philosophy. I'm using Linux as the philosophy to say, you may not control me. You may not collect my data. And I got news for you. As I'm getting more and more into Linux, and to be fair, I have not completely dumped Windows because I have a perfectly fine working Windows 7 computer, which, by the way, I have blocked every bit of telemetry on it for those people that will tell me that. Yes, I'm well aware if you have a standard Windows 7 computer laying around, it probably has telemetry. But if you caught on early enough, you still have the version of Update Center that can block certain installs. Newer versions, even on Windows 7, you cannot block their telemetry, but you could back then, and I have blocked everything that would give telemetry. So, with that being said, I'm not dumping the Windows computer entirely. I'm using this 2-year and longer period of time to learn absolutely everything I can. And I got news, as I started looking at what you can do with Linux. I have here that I will be fully releasing and unveiling later this week. This book was entirely written, developed, produced on Linux. Websites, I have entire websites written and produced on Linux. Every application I need is on Linux that I can utilize. Now, does GIMP work as streamlined as Photoshop? No. But the reality is, I don't necessarily have to have the most streamlined thing. I'd rather have a little bit more of a pain to make the statement. Because when you say, I'm going to be a little bit more intentional to make the statement to say, you may not do with me what you want, I now have the full ability to sit back and say, you know what? It may take me more time and have slightly higher risk if I manually back up all my files rather than just push a button and forget about it and it's all in the cloud. But what happens when that cloud is hacked? What happens when they decide that you violated terms and conditions and they immediately lock you out? That's happened. Look it up. But I want to be more intentional than that. And I've used Linux as a philosophy that I don't have to absolutely have the best program for graphics. I need a program that gets done what I need to get done. And I designed this whole book cover in GIMP. I wrote every bit of the text in LibreOffice. I formatted everything to be sent to a publisher without any proprietary software, without any proprietary operating system. And I got news for you, of people who do self-publish their own stuff, neither of my files were rejected. If you read about people doing this type of stuff, it is very common for one or both of your files, your cover design or your interior design, to be rejected multiple times. None of my files were rejected. Linux worked perfectly fine. Now again, as I said, Photoshop does work a little bit better than GIMP. But is it work good enough that I would support the company like Adobe, who wants to now, if I wanted to Photoshop nowadays and I didn't already have a good copy of it, which by the way means anybody from now going forward who graduates with graphic design, who's only taught how to use Photoshop in their classes, now has to agree to a subscription service, which is not prejudicial towards whom is buying it. And you say, oh, not prejudicial. Well, that's good. No, that's bad. Because if I am a multi-billion-dollar corporation, or I am a startup graphic design guy, if I think, because society has told me that Photoshop is my only option for good graphics, I have a serious barrier of entry into the marketplace. But if I look back and say, there is this thing called GIMP, and it can do everything I can do on Photoshop, I'd rather use that. Okay? Now, and I think back even further, because I was reading this documentary, and this gentleman here, Aaron Schwartz, is quite a bit younger than I am. I don't know exactly how old he was. Of course, he killed himself in response to a lot of pressure from the government, and pretty much this guy was an amazing guy. He had a very short life, but he accomplished way more than any 5 or 10 people. And if I look back over this and I think about the opportunities that I had and the opportunities available now, the opportunities available now are infinitely better than they were then. One of the reasons I did not stay with and keep up to date with programming is because of the overwhelming cost of doing programming when I was in college. I took C++. I did some great work in C++, but a C++ compiler, I mean, I could always go into the college and use the computer lab there, but a C++ compiler was several $1,000s. Now it's a couple clicks on a Linux command line interface. All of that stuff is still available. And I think about all this because I've been having a lot of discussions with a young man that I mentor who's really at that exact age right now where he's starting to look ahead at the future and go, what is it I want to do? And I'm like, the most important thing to do is to not let the school bog you down. Stick with your dreams and figure out how to solve them. whatever your dreams happen to be. And the reality is, you don't need proprietary software. You don't need proprietary solutions. You need to sit back and study and take some time and learn. And that means play less video games, people. Watch less TV. Watch less YouTube videos. Sit down and learn how to do something. Now, of course, many YouTube videos nowadays, man, you could watch videos to learn how to do things. In fact, I did, and I will be unveiling the images sooner than the book is unveiled. I just did some very beautiful 3D images for this book in Blender. I forgot how to do something. Quick search on the internet, found a YouTube video. 7-minute YouTube video taught me how to do something fluently in Blender. If I wanted to use 3ds Max, it'd cost me a site license. I think it's $200 or $300 a month, which is a major barrier to enter the marketplace for a small startup developer. Okay? And that's the thing, is that with the power of free and open source software, with the power of Linux, and of course, Blender is cross-platform. You can install it on Windows too. And, GIMP is cross-platform. LibreOffice is cross-platform. But I want the platform itself to be a free and open source system. So I'm not at the mercy of a Microsoft, and I'm not at the mercy of an Apple. And this is why we need to get behind the Librem 5 phone in the Linux community, because it's going to give us an open source platform. And I've railed against it a little bit on a few points, because I think it's still just one company, and that's a little scary. But that one company will be paving the way for others. And I believe that they are also behind the free and open source system. So if we get one good strong flagship, I think the other things will come out. So Linux as a philosophy pretty much means for us that we want to learn what it takes to do things without being at the mercy of a big company. Whether that's at the mercy of your email servers or the mercy of your data, your photos, all that kind of stuff, we need to sit back and we need to understand we have options that are not Microsoft and are not Apple for our computing devices. We need to realize that there's software packages beyond Microsoft Office or Google Docs. We need to realize that Photoshop is not the only player inside of your graphic editors. I mean, look at Inkscape, look at GIMP, look at Krita, look at Blender, of course. I don't need Dreamweaver to do web design. In fact, other than the fact that I don't have a what you see, what you get editor on the side of it, just to double column, I think Bluefish is a much better editor than Dreamweaver from the editing coding point of view. I can do all the same batch replace stuff. From the standpoint of writing, from the standpoint of all the work I need to do. Sure, are there better audio editors out there than Audacity? Probably. But you know what? It only becomes a barrier to you if A, you fail to want to learn new software, or if B, you're never introduced to it to begin with. Take some time to learn what the open source and free software is, and realize that if it can be installed on your system cross-platform, install it. Take some time to learn how to use it. Take that time. Stand up for Linux as a philosophy to say, you may not have my data. You may not direct what my computer looks like. You may not direct what I can or cannot do with my own computer hardware. Stand up for that. Stand up for freedom, and stand up for choice, and stand up for Linux as a philosophy. So if you like this video, feel free to pass it along. Feel free to subscribe. And if you would like to help support what we are doing, check out switchtolinux.com/support, and you can learn how that you can help support this channel. Currently, we have Patreon and we have Amazon links down below, and I have some other support methods coming up soon, so keep an eye on that website there, and that will get you any direction you want to go. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.